Okay, so we're going to dive into this incredible ancient story, and it totally flips our modern ideas about suffering right on their head. It's all about this one guy who seemed to be in the absolute worst place at the worst possible time. Or was he? Let's get into it.
So, this is Simon. He's from a place called Cyrene, which is basically modern-day Libya. He's probably just in Jerusalem for the Passover festival, like thousands of other people. Just another face in the crowd, a total nobody, until, bam, he gets pulled right out of that crowd and thrown into the middle of one of the most pivotal moments in history.
So you might be asking, why are we zooming in on this one tiny forced moment? Well, it's because what happened to Simon offers this completely radical alternative to all the messages we get today about dealing with tough times. You know that whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps thing? This story just blows that idea out of the water. All right, let's really try to get inside Simon's head here. Put yourself in his sandals for a second. This wasn't some noble volunteer raising his hand, okay? He was basically drafted, forced into this whole thing right in the middle of this chaotic, absolutely terrifying scene. I mean, can you even imagine?
He wasn't acting out of some deep faith. Nope. He was moved by force. A Roman soldier grabs him. Just think about the sheer confusion, the terror of that moment. He's not thinking about destiny or some grand plan. His thoughts are probably way simpler, right? Why me? Of all the people here, why me?
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. The Gospel of Mark actually names Simon's sons Alexander and Rufus. Now, why would the writer do that? It's a tiny detail, but it's huge. The thinking is the people reading this in Rome, they probably knew these guys. This little clue suggests that Simon's awful, forced encounter completely changed his life. So much so that it set his entire family on a new path. That horrible detour, it became the main road for the rest of his life. Wow.
So, Simon was forced to carry someone else's burden. But what happens when we feel like we're forced to carry our own burdens all by ourselves? This is where we pivot to a really modern problem. Because when suffering, especially something like an illness, just sticks around and doesn't go away, some of the popular advice we get about staying positive can actually do more harm than good. I'm sure you've heard this kind of thing before, right? Even if it's not religious. It's this idea that if you're suffering, the fix is all on you. Just think more positively. Have more faith. You can literally will yourself to be better. But think about what that does. It puts this crushing weight on the person who's already hurting. The message, whether it's said out loud or not, is pretty clear. If you're not healing, well, you must not be trying hard enough.
The author Barbara Ehrenreich just nails it with this quote. She says this constant pressure to be positive can feel like a second disease. Just try to imagine that. You're already fighting a serious illness, and now, on top of that, you have to fight a war against your own totally normal feelings of fear or sadness. You start feeling guilty just for not being the perfect, cheerful patient. It's exhausting. Okay, so let's break this down. You've got two completely different ways of looking at this. On one side, you have this prosperity theology mindset. It's all about the individual. The responsibility is 100% on the person who's suffering. But on the other side, you have what we can call a theology of accompaniment. And here, the focus totally shifts to community and solidarity. The responsibility is shared. It's a huge difference, right? It's not about trying to magically get rid of the suffering, but about getting through it together.
So let's dig into this alternative path, the one Simon of Cyrene shows us. It's this really powerful idea called accompaniment.
Now, accompaniment isn't about showing up with all the answers or spitting out cheesy lines like, hey, look on the bright side. No way. It's what some people call the ministry of presence. It just means you show up, you walk with someone through their pain, you help them carry that heavy load, exactly like Simon did. It's that simple and that profound. Pope Francis explains this so well. The point isn't to just wave a magic wand and make suffering disappear. The point is to actually enter into that suffering with other people. And it's that act, that solidarity, that completely transforms what the suffering means. And, maybe most importantly, it makes sure nobody has to face it all by themselves. That's a game changer. I mean, just look at the difference here. On the one hand, you've got one person just buckling under this huge weight. But then you look at the other side, and that same weight is being lifted by a whole community. That is the core idea. When suffering is shared, it already starts to lose its power. The very act of sharing that load is like a rebellion against despair. The weight might still be there, but suddenly, it's bearable.
Okay, this all sounds great in theory, right? But what does it actually look like in real life? How do we become a Simon for the people around us?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be some huge, dramatic gesture. Seriously.
Carrying a burden can be as simple as picking up groceries for a neighbor who's sick, or just sitting and really listening to a friend who's having a hard time without jumping in to try and fix everything. It can even be as small as sending a text that just says, "Hey, thinking of you." It's all about those small, real, tangible acts of just being there.
And you know what? This whole idea of accompaniment doesn't just stop when you clock in for work. It has this massive and frankly often overlooked impact in the professional world too.
Okay, get this. A recent study found that 1/3 of all employees, 1 out of every 3 people, would literally switch companies just to be in a more empathetic environment. 1/3. That's not a small number. That tells you something huge about what people actually value at work today.
Just think about how powerful this is. A manager asks an employee, "How are you doing?" And she gives the automatic answer, "I'm fine." But then the manager leans in and says, "No, how are you really doing?" That one extra word, really, changes everything. That simple act of digging just a little deeper shows that you actually care. That's how you help carry an emotional burden at work. And that's what builds rock-solid trust and loyalty.
So when you boil it all down, what does it mean to bear each other's burdens? It's empathy. That's the whole thing. It's making a real choice to try and understand what another person is going through, to put yourself in their shoes, and to help lift that weight, even if it's just for a little while.
So I want to leave you with this question. For Simon, that forced, horrible detour ended up becoming his destiny. So what about you? What's the detour in your life right now? That thing that feels like an inconvenient interruption, a friend's late-night call, a neighbor asking for a favor. What if that's not an interruption at all? What if that's an invitation? A call to share someone's burden, and maybe, just maybe, to discover a whole new meaning for your own journey in the process.